People don't use their brains anymore. You have to actually choose to think these days. You can just outsource your thinking to AI. No, you need cognitive sovereignty. A large language model is a word probability machine. It can't take actions. It can't search the web. It can't do anything. It's just a word generator. And the reason it's so good at generating words in ways that sound human is because it has so much data.
Where is the line that makes it AGI that can't be crossed at this point?
Being able to have all of the cognitive capabilities of a human. So right now, all of the things that it can do, it's been explicitly trained to do that. Whereas with a human, it's you can show it maybe a couple times and then it's good to go. Siri is an example of agentic AI that wasn't machine learning. Siri was kind of the hard-coded AI, if you recognize certain words, then do this. But then if you said something slightly outside its knowledge, it would say sorry, I can't answer that.
Sometimes I'll be doing some research and it'll pull a study that I know is not true. And then I'll ask for the study to be shown and then they're oh, we can't find it. Sorry about that.
Because the models do hallucinate. They make things up. Because they are word generators, they're finding patterns in text. They're word generators. You can recognize these hallucinations and be wait, that is total BS. Some random thing that sounds like it could totally be a thing. But because you have studied this and because you're an expert in it, you're huh?
What about people that think the AI is just take all of the jobs?
I would say that it's a valid fear. It's a scary time. Yet,
we are back for episode 6, right?
yes, episode 6.
I am so excited. Today, we're going to keep this mostly focused on AI, which is going to be so fun.
Yay, I'm excited to answer your questions. I'm curious what questions you have.
Okay, well, let's start real basic. What is AI?
Okay, so AI is the simulated intelligence of a machine. So it is any kind of machine that appears to have some kind of human intelligence. So back originally, some of the earlier forms of AI were things like route planning, like your navigator, right, in your car, and Google Maps, for example. Those aren't machine learning. Those are different types of AI than we see now with large language models, and we can get into the difference between machine learning and AI and how they're different. But AI, again, is a simulated intelligence of a machine. So you really could technically have an AI that is just hard-coded to give you responses. So, if you were to program a model to, if it receives the input hi or hello, then it says hi. And otherwise it says, sorry, I don't know, what you just said. So if you were to send the model howdy and it didn't recognize hi or hello, then it would just respond, sorry, I don't know what you just said. And so AI can be very rudimentary in its actual intelligence, but it is this simulated intelligence of a machine. And machine learning is a subset of AI where the AI is actually smart in the sense that it learns from data and it improves over time. And the large language models that we see right now, like ChatGPT, large language models are a type of AI. They use machine learning and they are text generators. They simply generate one token, and you can think of a token as a fragment of a word, after another, over and over and over again. They're these word generators. So that's something like ChatGPT, etc. And those learn from data. They learn from text data from the internet. So notoriously, models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, those have been trained on data scraped from the whole internet. And that includes, in some cases, things like books and copyrighted material that exists online. Over time, it learns a probabilistic distribution of words, which basically means that it learns how words interact with each other. It learns patterns in text. It learns, given the words that have come before, what's the most likely word to come next. You can kind of think of large language models as in the sense that they generate a new token independently every time. Like it runs itself over and over and over again and generates a new token every time. I'll caveat that and say that there was a new model, a novel approach tried by Meta where they actually generated multiple tokens at a time. But in general, you generate one token at a time. You're running the model over and over and over again. You can think of it kind of like in school where you're passing, those stories where you would pass around a piece of paper and everyone would write a word or a sentence, right? And so in the case of writing one word each, you're kind of given this string of words that have come before you, and then you have to say, okay, probabilistically, what's the most likely word to come next? What's a word that makes sense, right? So then you're thinking in terms of probabilities, right? You're not going to just choose a random word. It actually has to make sense. It doesn't choose just the most likely word every time. It samples from this probabilistic distribution, which we can get into. That's a little bit more complicated, but basically it's like, think of it as something basic like this, where if you have the phrase, the cat in the, say 90 times out of 100, you'll choose the word hat. So the model will say the cat in the hat. So it has a 90% probability of choosing hat, but then 10% probability of choosing many other words. That might go after the cat in the bathtub, cat in the car, cat, lots of places where a cat could be. That perhaps sums up to 10%. So then, 10 out of 100 times it might choose one of those other potentially likely words. So that's what we mean by a probabilistic distribution, and the fact that it's not always choosing the most likely word. And so there is some kind of nuance. And because of this, because it's a stochastic system, which means that it depends on probabilities, it's not deterministic. So the difference between stochastic systems and deterministic systems, stochastic systems are different. The output relies on probability. So the input is not the input. Given the same input into an equation, say you have an equation f of x, given the same x, the y, the output in the equation, might change because it's based on probability. So as I said, the y in 90% of cases might be hat, but then the y in 10 out of 100 cases might be something else, probably will be something else. So that's a stochastic system, where it's deterministic is the fact that every time you, given the same y and given the same function, or given the same x and given the same function f of x, you're always going to get y, the same y. So it would always be, the cat in the hat every time. And so these systems where you're trying to guess, you're trying to tell, is text AI generated or not? That's very challenging because this is a stochastic system and because it varies so much. The probability distributions of the output tokens varies. Not only is it stochastic, so not only are you working with probabilities rather than a system that it's always going to be the same, but that probability distribution changes so much based on the input. So the input that you give it, the prompt that you give it, changes this probabilistic distribution. So for example, if I say, talk to me like you're on Reddit, probabilistic distribution of the text outputs is going to be very different than if you say, talk to me like, you are a professional scientific researcher writing a academic paper, right?
Yeah.
That text output is going to be very different.
Yeah.
And the reason it is different is because the probabilities of the words that it's outputting are vastly different. So yeah, so these systems where you're trying to determine whether something is AI or not ultimately are basically impossible to configure. For more reasons than what I just said, but that's a kind of a general overview. I know I just said a lot.
No, I love that. I think that's super helpful. I'm curious. So the amount of, you say the input is X and then it's a variable, right, of the output. And you use the example cat in the hat.
Yeah.
And then potentially another word. So is that percentage, you said maybe a 10%, that it's going to be another word.
Yeah.
Is that programmed by the platform itself? So would ChatGPT say, we're going to give you, the machine, a 30% variation, or how does that come to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So the model learns on its own. That's the machine learning component of it. The model learns these patterns in these texts. And based on what it's taken from the internet, it has learned that in text on the internet, when it sees the cat in the hat, 90% of the time, or when it sees the cat in the, 90% of the time, the word that comes after is hat.
Yeah.
But maybe 10% of the time it's something else. So the model is learning these distributions on its own through the training process of analyzing the input data that it receives, which is, on this case, the internet. But as you shift, if you say, talk to me about Dr. Seuss, and then you say the cat in the the probability of it being hat is going to be 99.9.
Right.
So the input that you give it when you say, talk to me like Dr. Seuss, that's the X. And then you say, your X is the sentence, talk to me about Dr. Seuss and with Dr. Seuss content. The cat in that's going to dramatically shift the probabilities, right? Whereas if you say, talk to me like a scientific paper, and you say the cat it might say lab or something like that, right? But yeah, again, the model learns these probabilities on its own through massive amount of text of data. And one of the reasons these large language models are so good and appear to be human, appear to have kind of human-like thinking when they really are these text generators is because they have so much data. And so one of the things that we can talk about as we're talking about machine learning and as we talk about AGI and what that is the fact that large language models by themselves are not AGI. They cannot be AGI. There's no world in which a large language model, the architecture of a large language model, is AGI. It needs to be significantly augmented. A large language model is a word probability machine. It can't take actions. It can't search the web. It can't do anything. It's just a word generator. And the reason it's so good at generating words in ways that sound human is because it has so much data. And the data that it's learning from is labeled data, which means you take the internet, sentences from the internet, you can break it up into training data. And training data has an input and an output, or a label, the correct output that the model should predict. And with lots of different types of AI, getting labeled data is challenging because you need to say, for example, let's look in the case of computer vision models. Labeled data would be, say you're building something very, very simple, like distinguishing between a cat and a dog. Something super simple, like if we're talking about autonomous vehicles, there's so many more things it needs to classify and recognize and respond to. But let's just talk about a very simple, it's either a cat or a dog, and you can assume that it is one of those two things. The labeled data that you would need would be lots of images of dogs and lots of images of cats labeled, saying this is a dog, this is a cat. And so as you expand and become more, complex and have more things that you're trying to get the model to recognize or to decide. So as you expand the capabilities of what the models are doing, you need to have this labeled data, right? So in the case of computer vision models, in the case of something very simple like a cat and a dog, you have these labeled images of cats or dogs. But you have to get that data from somewhere, right? You have to go search the web and label them and make sure it's right. You don't want to feed the model incorrect data. But with large language models, the data is already labeled. And that's because what it's predicting is just the next word. So if you have the sentence, say we scrape your website and we have lots of text and even just the first sentence, hi, my name is Kayla Barnes. You're going to get lots of training data samples from that. How? Well, you would so there's a start token at the beginning of the sentence to indicate that you're at the start of a sentence. So that's like a secret, invisible marker that says you're at the beginning of the sentence. Hi. So then you would train the model. So that's the first data sample, is given this starter token, output hi. Now the next is given the starter token plus hi, output my. Now the next is given the starter token plus hi, my, give name. Then the next is given the starter token plus hi, my name, give output is. And then you go on and on and on. And so you're getting massive amounts of training samples.
Yeah.
And so these models, because there's so much training data, these models get really good.
Yeah.
And it's kind of known that the more data you have, assuming the data is good, the smarter the model is going to be, the better it is, because it's going to learn the patterns in text. The patterns in text is like a way of saying the probabilistic distribution of text, but patterns in text. It's going to learn them better and better because it's going to see more examples. When we talk about the quality of data, we also have to think about the fact that, there's been a lot of like hoopla about the fact that a lot of these models are basing their info on like Reddit, right? So recent models, I think, have like either removed Reddit from their training data if there's, starting it again from scratch, or, finding other ways to kind of get rid of the Reddit info from the models. Because again, you want to have high quality data. The data is what is portrayed in the model, is what is portrayed in the output to the model. But then there's also something called emergent behavior which is something new with large language models where the model displays capabilities not seen in the training data, which is kind of this mystical property of models. And this is why we can have something like a polymath with large language models. Moving into the emergent behavior thing. So large language models have started to show something called emergent behavior, which is when the model, as I said, shows capabilities not shown in the training data. So for example, it can find correlations between disparate fields of study that were never found before. That is why we can have something like a polymath in large language model systems, because, I mean, if it's inherently right, if it's finding novel insights, then that is an emergent behavior. Because if it's simply just a probabilistic parrot, like the old large language models were before the transformer, which is the new model architecture that came in with ChatGPT, which made the model so much better. Even just back in 2016, 2018, the large language models were very much more rudimentary than they are now. They truly were stochastic parrots. You could tell that they were just echoing the data that they got.
Yeah.
It was kind of almost like fun to see the outputs. I actually have it on my private Instagram and one of my highlights back in 2018. I posted like a basic LLM and was like, oh my God, look how cool this is. Maybe it was 2017. Anyway, before the transformer, which was a total overhaul of the models. Well, not total overhaul, but they created some optimizations that we can talk about that caused the models to become much smarter. After the transformer, we saw this thing called emergent behavior, where it has this ability to output novel behavior, like finding correlations that never existed before, right? Like being an expert in two fields and finding those correlations. And remember, for those of you who might be new here, a polymath is an expert in more than one field. In history, we've had famous polymaths like Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, Leonardo da Vinci, and they had outsized impacts on the world around them because they were able to be experts in more than one field and then find these correlations that were never found before. And, thus contribute significant advancements to society and science and what have you. AI can be the ultimate polymath in the fact that it's an expert in thousands, millions, potentially, fields, and can find those correlations because of the fact that now they're showing this thing called emergent behavior, which is interesting. And it does mystify, Stanford professors and researchers, like how this even exists.
Yeah.
So sorry, I just rambled.
No, that was great. But on that note, so you kind of said AGI was not possible with LLMs, right? But did we think that the emergent behavior was possible?
True. Yes. First of all, emergent behavior has been shown in other types of AI models, just not large language models before.
Okay.
Large language models were too complex. Like the relationships between words was too complex. That we weren't able to kind of show that until we were able to make the models much smarter and much bigger, which was a result of the transformer. So because now they're massive and they have like all of these neurons, they're able to find these nuances in data. It's kind of become this massive, really smart brain. But ultimately, all it's doing at the output layer, it's a function. What large language models are is it's just a function. It's just a mathematical equation where you have an input and then it's going through this massive, super high dimensional equation. It's learning features or variables in the data. And so it gets this input and it has a lot of variables in the equation. And then it's just doing a bunch of calculations, or specifically like matrix multiplications and operations on this massive matrix and matrices of data, and then outputs a final number or decision, which then transforms into a token, right? So like it will output a final number, which then maps to cat or bathtub, right? But it's all of it gets transformed into numerical form. All the inputs, whether it's a word or an image or whatever it is, gets transformed into numbers. All of that gets processed in the brain and then out in the quote unquote brain, which is just a massive function, a super high dimensional function. And then outputs a number that then gets transformed back into the proper output that you can discern, right, in like human form.
Yeah.
Large language models, because they're just a function, emergent behavior, it's kind of like the brain. I mean, the model is modeled off of a brain. It has quote unquote neurons.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and we can get to that. Specifically, the model we're talking about, the transformers. Not all AI uses neural networks. Neural networks are a form of architecture that you can use for AI. Not all of them use it, but it's a machine learning architecture that the transformers use. So the models like ChatGPT use them. But ultimately, again, it's an equation that outputs a number that then gets transformed into a token. So large language models, that's it. There's no like, they wouldn't just magically have the capability to like output not a number. You would have to like significantly change the architecture of the model, or like output something that isn't just a word. But you would have to change the architecture of the model, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just still wondering though, because obviously it would still be outputting words even if it started thinking on its own, right?
Yes, AGI is something that has all of the cognitive capabilities of a human, which includes actions, taking actions in the world. So if you tell it to, send an email, or navigate my computer and go to my photos and find this picture and then send it to Susie. Like, it has to then take action in the world, which large language models can't. So models like ChatGPT that you use now that search the web, that have these tools, those are augmented large language models. And they have to be trained to do that. They have to learn to recognize, okay, given this input text, does that map to one of my tools? Like kind of Siri did this, right? This was before Siri was arguably. Yeah, Siri's the worst. Siri is an example of like agentic AI that wasn't machine learning. Yeah. So Siri was kind of the hard-coded AI that we talked about at the beginning, where it's like, if you recognize certain words, then do this, or then do that. And so it could sound human if you talk to it in exactly the right way, in the way that it recognized. But then if you said something like slightly outside its knowledge base, it would say like, sorry, I can't answer that, right?
What a miss, by the way, for Apple.
Oh, huge miss. Well, they're struggling with their machine learning a lot. But so they had an early form of agentic AI in that it seemed human, it seemed AI, it was more of like a hard-coded AI, but it seemed like AI, and they were able to take actions. It could text your friends, it could search the web, but it had to be able to input the text, find keywords that it recognized, like route me to X, find a map of this, send a text to so-and-so, call so-and-so. But if you like talked in a way it didn't understand, that it didn't like explicitly know, okay, this command maps to this output or this action, texting so-and-so, then it would really struggle. And so with these large language models, it has to learn, given this input, text Kayla, it has to learn, okay, this command, text Kayla, that maps to my ability to text someone. And then I have to do this, and then I have to do this, and I have to do this. And it goes back to this labeled problem that we had, right? Where we talk about how text is all self-labeled. It's called self-supervised system, self-supervised learning, where the model, it has the data that it's using to learn is all self-labeled, right? Because it's just, the label is just the word that it needs to predict given the prior words before. But when you're getting into the world of taking action, that labeled data isn't there anymore. Like, you don't have an abundance of data just inherently that says, like, if I say, take Evie for a walk, it knows to go do that. Like, there isn't just that easily accessible data set of, given this text input, this is the action I should take. It's not like a human in that sense. Is that clear?
Yeah, I think it's clear. So obviously ChatGPT rolled out the agents, right? And the agents can do things.
Yes.
They're not that great, but you can say to like, go to my email and send an email, right?
Yeah.
It can start doing that. So like, where is the line that makes it AGI that can't be crossed at this point?
Oh, so being able to have all of the cognitive capabilities of a human, where it learns really quickly. So right now, all of the things that it can do, it's like been explicitly trained to do that.
Okay.
Whereas with a human, it's like you can show it maybe a couple times and then it's like good to go.
Yeah.
And AI is not like that. Like it takes a lot of work to get it to do any action that it can do, let alone to cover all possible actions or to teach it to learn. At Stanford, I took this course called meta learning, which showed some interesting, Chelsea Finn was the professor. She's doing some interesting research. And, with most models now, you have to teach it explicitly to take any action. So if you want to teach it to go to your email and send an email, you have to give it lots of examples of, hey, of possible input text, send an email to so-and-so, but like all the different possible ways you could tell it to do that, right? So that it's not just like only recognizing one way of telling it to send an email.
Yeah.
And then transforming that input text of what you wanted to say, the command to do it, whatever, into a cohesive email, and then sending the sender and the receiver and the CC, and then sending it properly. That takes a lot of work, and that in itself takes a lot of training just to do that one task, send an email from a text input.
Yeah.
Chelsea, she's working on something called meta learning, where you are learning how to learn, which is what you kind of need for something like AGI, where it's like you can teach it one task and then it can, based on having kind of done something similar, it can learn another task. I haven't heard any updates on the meta learning front. Maybe there's some more research. I was doing that in 2020. So yeah, I have not heard anything new from that. A lot of the talk around AGI, for example, Yann LeCun, who runs AI research at Meta, he talks a lot about the fact that we actually need a whole new type of model architecture or rather at least augmented type of model architecture to make AGI, and that it is not imminent at all. And yeah, I mean, AGI, again, it's the type of AI we've had until now has been you train things specifically to do tasks.
Yeah.
AGI would be it can learn any task on its own. And that is just very hard to train.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for explaining all of that.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into some practical questions really quick. Actually, no, first I think we should talk. Can you give a quick timeline? Because I think individuals feel like AI is just becoming available now. So like you've already been studying this and doing this for many, many years. So can you just give us a quick timeline?
Yeah.
And when did it super speed?
So AI has existed for over 30 years. It's been going on for a long time. As I said, some of the earlier AI was like navigation systems, anything where it's like a simulated intelligence of a machine, or a route optimization, route planning. That's actually like, that's something a human would do. And if you can have a model do it, then that's great. That's like AI. There's this meme that Elon posted a few years ago that's like AI or machine learning is, which is a form of AI, is just glorified statistics, which is true. I mean, it's any kind of analysis over numbers. So whether that's in order to make a decision, like in classification systems where you're classifying something as a cat or a dog, or you're an autonomous vehicle, looking at a stop sign or a person crossing the street and classifying those as such and then reacting properly. Or if you're predicting house prices, or if you're, predicting the likelihood of a stock going up or down, like any kind of analysis that leads to prediction or decision or likelihood or optimization, that's AI. And so it's, in that sense, it's been going on for a very long time. Ranking systems were kind of the hot AI back in 2018. And that also used neural networks, although some companies use decision trees, which are another form of machine learning, or it can be both, but they were using the machine learning type, where it can be both, as in it can be like not machine learning or machine learning decision trees. There are lots of different types, but there are lots of different architectures you can use, right? I give neural networks as one of them. But back in 2018, people were making these ranking algorithms, and they still make them today, right? You've heard that, I don't know if you heard in 2016, they were talking about how Tinder is $1 billion algorithm. That's an AI algorithm determining whether you're more likely to swipe right or swipe left, or, matchmaking algorithms, whether a person might like another person. All of these are analyzing information, turning it into numbers, and then finding insights. That is AI. And so AI is able to, because it is able to turn non-numerical data into numbers and then draw insights and optimize and make things better and find improvements that we could never find, because it's finding it on like a micro scale, because it's able to transform data into numbers. We are able to improve every industry because everything can be transformed into numbers.
Yeah.
They say that math is the language of the universe, and it is. I mean, physics, right? It explains the way things move, and models are getting better at physics. And the way we behave as people is also quite probabilistic. There are questions as to whether we have free will. I think we do, but who knows? Are we just these kind of systems that move based on probabilities? Potentially. But even if we aren't, we can surely model our behavior as such. And if we behave outside of that probability, that would still be accounted for in some super low probability event, right? And so we can model the world through numbers and then draw insights and optimize. And so when you apply this analysis, optimization to anything, you can optimize everything. And that is what I'm most excited about with AI, is we can improve every single industry. We can find health cures. We can find these micro correlations in data that then show us cures to cancer and treatments and improving kids' learning styles. And not to mention the customization options with AI, right? Where you learn individuals' profiles and then just output content that is for them. That's another, there's so many different types of AI out there, and people narrow it down to one small type. Tends to be generative AI, where there's a lot of kind of debate, right, around, is this ethical? It's outputting copyrighted material, etc. But we should just stop AI altogether because of this. And that is not seeing the full picture of what's capable with AI.
Yeah.
And so when we have people who don't understand what AI is, and they're wanting to stop AI, or they refuse to implement AI at their companies, we're missing an enormous opportunity, because again, AI is more than large language models. It's more than generative AI systems. AI is an optimizer over numbers. If you want to draw any kind of insights from your data, I'm not talking about generating text. I'm not talking about generating images. I'm talking about insights from your data that can then help you make enormous leaps forward, find correlations you could never find with the human eye.
Yeah.
That is AI, and that is what needs to be applied to every industry.
Yeah, I love that. Why would someone use a model like Claude when it can't search the internet? Like, what's the use case there? Because it's built to be nicer. Is that why people like it?
People use Claude because they recognize that it is a model that is really good at generating text that sounds kind of human. That is what I have seen relative to other models. Its output tends to be the most human. People like its personality. A lot of work has gone into making it have like a optimistic, cheerful, very human-like personality. I think they've actually done research on this, comparing it to other models, and it has like an enthusiasm for life and things like that, and optimism.
Remember, someone commented I was the Claude of AIs, and it's like Brian Johnson is the ChatGPT. It's like cold and still, and
Oh my God,
you're the Claude.
You're like, so tell me about Claude. Yeah, Claude is amazing. We love Claude.
Okay, good. I'm like, well, why would people use Claude?
I always recommended Claude to people for like therapy. Although as Claude, they keep putting more and more guardrails around Claude. Like I have people tell me now that they're talking to Claude and they're like, I'm going through a breakup, and Claude is like, keeps telling me like I have mental health issues and I need to see a professional. And I'm like, dude, I'm just sad.
Oh my gosh.
This is not me, by the way, who experienced this. Like, let's be clear. But yeah, and so I've like had to kind of usher them towards other platforms.
We seem to all be cracking down on that a little bit though, right?
I know, which is, we're going to keep swinging, like overcorrecting and then undercorrecting and overcorrecting until we find the middle ground.
Yeah.
And that's another thing I want to talk about is like, yeah, there will be some mistakes made. But I want to compare that to other scientific advancements and eras. So we'll get to that. But so Claude is good at generating text that sounds human. So if you're doing any kind of creative work or brainstorming, it's good at that. It's good at, used to be good at therapy. I don't know how it is these days. But yes, it is extremely important. Oh, it's also good at summarization, synthesizing, anything where you don't need actual data from the web to back it up.
Yeah.
But if you do not use Claude. I remember I don't remember how long ago, it might have been a year ago, they were betaing their like web search tool, and it was so bad. No offense, Anthropic, but it was horrible. And I mean, even today, the sources that exist for the ones that can search the web are still, you have to go and double check that they're actually saying what the model says that they say.
Yeah.
Because the models do hallucinate. This is something we should also talk about. They make things up because they are word generators. They're finding patterns in text. They're word generators. And so when it's augmented with the capability to search the web, what it does is it will say, okay, this is something that needs factual data. I'm going to search the web. I'm going to do this like a web search. Then it will pull in a few sources. Maybe it'll pull in 5. It's really up to the engineer doing this thing. And then it'll add that to the input that the model has when it's generating its output text. And so then it'll just like have your ask, then it'll have a bunch of sources, and then it'll do this word generation thing, right?
Yeah.
It's still just a word generator, but it has added these sources.
Yeah.
So, but even so, it can still mess up word generating from those sources that are right there. It can still mess up.
Yeah. I see that sometimes, like, I'll be doing some research or, putting together something that's scientific, and it'll pull a study that I know is not true because I know the data is just not there. And then I'll like ask for the study to be shown, and then they're like, oh, we can't find it, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry about it, but actually, no, there is no data to support that. I mean, the most epic fail one, I mean, I don't know the most, but it was of one that we got a laugh out of, was, remember when we were, you probably remember the story.
Yeah, definitely not the most epic fail.
It's not the most epic fail, but it was a pretty epic fail. I mean, so we were looking up a passage in the Bible.
Yeah.
And do you recall what it was?
I don't. But it was like, I think it was like too fudge. I forget.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what we were looking for. I gave it some sort of input like, hey, what I saw this number, given, it was like 2 something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you find a correlating passage? And it made up this completely false story about how sometimes like 2 Corinthians is also referred to as something completely obscure that isn't even available in the Bible. It was really a fail.
Yeah, I think it was like we had asked it, this is kind of going to butcher it, but we had asked it like, oh, what is 2 Corinthians 4:36 or something. And it was like, ooh, let me show you, like, yes, here's 2 Corinthians 2:36, often referred to as 2 Corinthians 4:36. And I was like, wait, why would that be commonly referred to as 4:36? And then
then we asked it like, who's referring to it as that? And then it's like, oh, actually, oops, it's actually never referred as that. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah, and so this is why I like to say that AI is really good for subject matter experts.
Yeah.
For teachers, it's awesome because you can recognize these hallucinations and be like, wait, that is total BS. Like if you're asking for a lesson plan, or like, when I was doing the 10 Days of AI Basics series, I would have my general idea of what I wanted to cover, but then I would have it generate a syllabus for me. And then I could go through and look at the syllabus and be like, wait, what? Like it's telling me to teach some random thing that like sounds like it could totally be a thing. Like it really sounds legit. But because you have studied this and because you're an expert in it, you're like, huh?
Yeah.
Is that a thing? And then you look and it's not a thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so AI for learning, hallucinations are rapidly improving. There's a lot of mitigations for them, but they are a problem now. There's actually a story of a Stanford professor who I took his class. It was a great class. It was called like media psychology. It was super cool. And they were talking about how it was before I worked at Meta, how like the scrolling, right? That's gambling addiction. So when you scroll, that's supposed to imitate
a
slot machine. So every time you scroll, you're pulling that slot machine. Am I going to win? Am I going to see something interesting? Over and over and over, and it's endless. There are a lot of things like that that are programmed into these systems that I should probably teach more about, because I didn't know that not everyone knew that the scrolling, was actually a slot machine. So the Stanford professor, who was also an expert in misinformation and technology, was writing a letter about some kind of case. This was back in December of 24. That was about banning deepfakes of political leaders. But he used research that he sourced from ChatGPT, but it was fake. And so he had like signed this thing like under penalty of perjury or whatever. I say that all of this is true, but he had used a hallucinated source. And so this is something that is important, and someone even like a expert in misinformation could potentially fall victim to. And so it's really important that we have people understand hallucinations, because this is something that I've been kind of going on about for almost 2 years now. Like, this is so important. Hallucinations are real. Be aware of what you're using. Claude does not have sources. AI is a word generator. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the fears that people have around AI. I know that you've gotten a lot of these comments, right? When you've gone on other podcasts, things of that nature. I think some of the top fears are probably the energy consumption, right? I've actually, and I don't know if it's real or not, but I've seen, it was like a preview of a documentary or something on Netflix. And it was like someone in a town close to a data center. They like weren't able to get water in their homes. I don't know if this is real, or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, you saw this on Netflix?
I think it was like a preview. You know how like when you go over it?
Yes.
And then it'll start to like preview something, I think, but I'm not sure.
There is so much misinfo out there about AI and water and the energy usage. It's crazy. I think we need a whole episode about this. I should just do a whole thing, because it's just out of control. Like, everyone is parroting the same thing. It uses so much water. It's destroying our planet. I have heard, and I need to research this more, but I have heard that the claims that people don't have access to water is total BS. I actually have a friend who is working on, and then also, yes, it uses water, but it also recycles the water. And so it's not just like using unlimited water. And also, yes, queries use energy, but so do lots of other things. Like eating hamburger, there are some stats that are like eating a hamburger uses 800 ChatGPT queries. So if you're kind of, obviously queries vary in the amount of energy that they're using based on how much input you're giving the model.
Can we talk, how many queries is a tofu? Because I like burgers, so I want people to see beef.
Tofu?
Yeah.
Oh, girl, I don't know. Whatever percentage less energy, or whatever fraction of energy the tofu takes compared to a burger would be the fraction of energy.
Well, maybe we just cut that, but maybe in the future.
No, I think it's interesting.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, we don't have to cut that. I'm just saying, I don't know, but it's a fraction, assuming that tofu uses less energy. But also, soy is also sketchy, right? Aren't they like destroying the Amazon rainforest for soy?
Or even like almonds, just because
almond milk,
it's like this big conversation around, and I'm not advocating that people eat like insane amount of meat or anything, obviously in the highest quality, but people think that like an almond is not ruining a bunch of wildlife, but actually the way that they harvest it, it kills all the turtles and all the squirrels and all the little animals that are in the field in like mass quantities.
Yeah. Everything has side effects.
Yeah.
And, driving a car, that uses a ton of energy. If you're actually looking, and I'm sorry to the listeners, this is something I'll come back with. I will actually make a sheet, potentially next week, of comparing energy usage in terms of water usage for various everyday things, or just listing it against ChatGPT queries. I was listening to TBPN the other day, and they were talking about like a pair of leather shoes is 9 million ChatGPT queries.
Wow.
So like things that we use energy, so do queries. And then the other thing is that AI, because it's this optimizer, because it analyzes numbers and is able to make novel scientific discoveries, because it is this optimizer, analyzer, we're able to cause advancements in our energy usage. So on the one hand, you're able to make systems more efficient, so have them use less energy. So scientific advancements have reduced the, technological advancements have reduced the energy usage of ChatGPT, of Google large language model queries, so AI Google queries, by tenfold in the last year.
Got it.
Additionally, there is active research going on in terms of semiconductor materials research. So the actual systems that carry energy, that move energy where it's lossy and you lose energy, those are being improved. So we will actually be able to have more efficient energy systems. We will be able to make advancements in renewable energy sources, potentially in nuclear. There's so much that we can potentially do with AI. There's this dream of the zero energy future where it's totally lossless, or where people can harness the power of the sun. Maybe we can make better systems that can harness the power of the sun, and then we're just chilling. So the improvements in technology that we'll see with AI. And again, I'm not just talking about large language models. I'm talking about AI and optimizer. Once we can get AI and the understanding of AI and the fact that it's math into the hands of every industry, we can optimize, we can make scientific advancements, we can have these novel solutions to energy usage and production.
Yeah.
And allocation.
Well, you also mentioned, even in a few episodes ago, the Microsoft new chip that used so much less water, right?
Yes, exactly. And it has was it using less water? It probably was, right? Or perhaps it used 1/3 because it brought it directly into the chip.
Yeah.
So it brought the coolant directly into the chip itself rather than the outside, which is much more efficient, right? So yeah, and there are enormous improvements and advancements in those fields now. Again, the main goal is to get the understanding of AI into the hands of everyone so that this optimizer can be applied to every industry, to make things better, to make things more smooth.
Okay, so another fear that many individuals seem to have is that AI is going to, take their jobs. They will not have work. What would you say to that?
The way I see it is that AI is going to take entire processes right now. In the current form, what's happening right now is that AI and AI agents are taking entire processes and automating them. So what does that mean? You could see it as, oh, it's going to take my job. But you could also see it as, okay, now if I can learn how to use these tools, I'm making massive strides. I'm the one coordinating this. So for example, if you have an AI agent that then looks through your product and finds, it goes through Slack messages, and it goes through customer interviews, and it goes through whatever documents, and figures out what features should be improved next for the next sprint or the next quarter, and it gives you a write-up, or makes a whole write-up. You can analyze that, because remember, it's not perfect yet. We still need this kind of human brain intervention, but you've just saved a week, 2 weeks of time.
Yeah.
What are you going to do now? You're going to go and you're going to start allocating to people. You're going to start moving forward on that. You're going to start ideating. Your job isn't gone. You're just not doing that tedious part.
Yeah.
And something I think is really interesting that Brene Brown talked about at Workday Rising was the fact that, and I was working with Workday there, was the fact that AI is going to help us be more human, because it's going to start automating the technical tasks. We have evolved to serve AI, or to serve technology, rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
And now AI will be able to handle those kind of automated, often tedious tasks. And then we will be able to go back to being more human and use these orchestrators to make massive leaps. Another thing is we'll see many more entrepreneurs. So people who are able to start companies in things that they're interested in. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to see the first billion-dollar solo one-person company. So that's cool. And so if you have a passion now, more than ever, you're able to be that solopreneur. I have a friend who was pregnant with her third kid, super pregnant, and started a school by herself, orchestrated everything with AI as her kind of co-pilot, her tool, her assistant, to help her. You can craft these elaborate business plans. Say you have an idea, you can work with AI to create a whole business plan. What are the technical aspects you need? Who do you need to hire? What do you need to do? How do you do the research? Like, it can help you with every single step of the process and break down this or structure this kind of nebulous idea you might have into an entire business plan and, weekly action items. It's amazing. Yeah. So really just learning to use these tools is what I would say to people. Learning to use the tools, learning to really use your brain. This is something we need to talk about on upcoming podcasts. Yeah. People don't use their brains anymore. Yeah. Like this has been happening. I do think it's because of technology, and it's not a not serious issue. Like, people kind of are on autopilot. They don't think critically anymore. And we need to teach people to think critically again. Yeah. You have to actually choose to think these days. You can just outsource your thinking to AI. No, you need cognitive sovereignty. Yes. You need cognitive sovereignty, and that's something that we need to talk about. But the last thing I wanted to talk about before we end, I do have to go, unfortunately, is that when we had electrical appliances, so, when we had the light bulb, after that, so there was one electrical socket in the house on the ceiling, then there started to be innovations with electrical appliances, so like a toaster or a washing machine. And when they started coming out with those, they didn't have an on and an off switch because, you only had one electrical socket, so you would just unplug it if you weren't using it. You would never just leave it plugged in and click the off switch. That didn't make sense, right? Yeah. And so when they had a laundry machine, it would be outside because I guess it was kind of messy. They had this outdoor laundry machine and it would plug into the ceiling inside. What happened was people got scalped. The laundry machine would go rogue and they would get their hair ripped off. Horrible, awful. Jeez. But they couldn't turn it off because the plug was all the way inside. There was no off switch. And so there were casualties. I don't know if there were actual deaths, but probably at some point in this iterative process of creating electrical appliances. But imagine if we had just stopped. Imagine if we'd been like, this is dangerous. We shouldn't be using electricity. We need to just stop. Yeah. We would have nothing. Think of everything that runs using electricity. Yeah. That just started with the light bulb. Yeah. And so we are entering, yes, a new era, and it's going to take some time to iron out the kinks, but we are going to be so grateful we did. And AI is very much likened to electricity. It is called the new electricity. It's going to underlie every single system because, again, it's just analyzing numbers and math are the language of the universe. So I'm very excited about it. And we have many more podcasts to talk about this. Yes. But yes, please leave your comments below.
Yeah. Any questions? Harper, AI questions, longevity questions. And I also just wanted to ask, because I really learned recently how important reviews are. If you are listening to this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you just leave us a review on either Apple or Spotify. And then if you are listening on YouTube, we would love a subscribe. We would love, a comment or a follow. It really means so much.
Yeah, it really does. So please. Also, by the time this comes out, I'll be 30. Yeah. So as my birthday gift, if you would please leave a review.
I know. I was going to mention that. And then I'm like, well, it'll be past by the time this episode comes out. So
yeah. Well, yes. So I'm 30, and as my birthday gift, please, I would love it. If you would leave a review or a comment or all the above, share it with a friend if you like it, and leave your comments about your questions, because I would like to answer them, and we will do a whole in-depth analysis on the energy usage and cognitive sovereignty, and there's so much to talk about with this. So thank you, everyone. Sorry to abruptly end. But we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you then. All right, bye.